For years, people on Earth had wondered if they were truly alone in the universe. Scientists searched the skies, sending signals, listening for echoes, and waiting for something, anything, that might answer. They didn't know that the answer had already come a long time ago, but not in the way they expected. Far beyond the reach of human telescopes, there existed something called the Galactic Council, a powerful federation made up of advanced civilizations from across distant galaxies. These beings had been watching Earth quietly for centuries. To them, humans were still young, still emotional, still fighting among themselves for things that didn't matter in the grand scale of the universe. They called Earth the wild planet, a place of potential, but also of chaos. When Earth finally managed to send its first clear interstellar message, a proud announcement that humanity was ready to join the cosmic community, the Council noticed. They decided to respond, but not because they respected humans. They wanted to test them, to see what kind of creatures lived on this small blue world that had suddenly spoken into the void. So one day, an invisible signal reached Earth. It wasn't a beam of light or sound. It was a coded message, one that only the most sensitive radio telescopes could detect. Scientists from around the world gathered to decode it. It was an invitation, a simple message. You are acknowledged. Send your representatives. The world went silent. Governments held secret meetings. No one knew what to expect. Many believed it was a trick, while others saw it as the greatest opportunity in human history. After months of discussion, a small group of scientists, diplomats, and thinkers was chosen. They were told to represent Earth, not any one country, but all of humanity. The meeting didn't happen in space. It happened through a kind of holographic projection, far beyond anything humans had ever created. When the team connected to the Council system, they found themselves standing inside a massive circular hall, bright, endless, and filled with beings that looked nothing like anything found on Earth. Some were made of light, some were mechanical, some were shapes that seemed to change every second. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. At the center stood the Council speaker, a tall, glowing figure whose voice carried through every mind without words. "Welcome, species of Earth," the voice said. "You have been noticed. State your purpose." The lead scientist stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly. "We come in peace," he said. "We seek to learn, to share, and to be part of the universe we now know exists." There was silence for a moment. Then, soft laughter echoed across the hall, not cruel but distant and cold. One of the other beings spoke. "Peace? You still fight among yourselves. You poison your air, destroy your oceans, and call it progress. What could you possibly offer to the Council?" The words hit like a heavy weight. The team stood frozen. They had expected curiosity or even kindness, not judgment, but they tried to stay calm. "We are learning," another representative said. "We have made mistakes, but we are changing. Our technology is advancing faster than ever. We want to contribute." The Council speaker tilted its glowing head slightly. "Every young species says the same," it replied. "You are not ready." The session continued, but it was clear. The Council didn't see humanity as equals. They saw them as children who had stumbled into an adult conversation. The team tried to explain Earth's progress, their breakthroughs in medicine, science, and communication, but every point was dismissed. One member of the Council even mocked them openly. "You cannot even unite your own planet," it said. "How do you expect to unite with the stars?" That sentence stayed in the minds of every Earth delegate. The meeting ended not with hope, but with humiliation. The Council promised to monitor Earth's progress, but the message was clear. Humans were not welcome among the stars. The projection faded and the room on Earth fell silent. For a long time, no one spoke. Then one of the engineers whispered, "They think we're weak." No one answered, but everyone knew it was true. In the following weeks, the event was hidden from the public. Only a few world leaders and scientists knew what had really happened. The official story was simple: no contact. But behind closed doors, something had changed. The representatives who had faced the Council could not forget the way they were looked at, not as partners but as insignificant creatures barely worth attention. That night one of them stood by his window, staring up at the stars. The same stars that once filled him with wonder now felt cold and distant. He realized something. Respect is never given freely. It must be earned. And maybe, in the eyes of the universe, humanity had never truly proven its worth. In the months that followed, subtle changes began to happen around the world. Governments that once distrusted each other started forming small alliances, quietly discussing things far beyond politics. Scientists who had once competed now shared research under secret programs. The idea spread like a spark. Humanity needed to evolve, not just in technology, but in unity. People still went to work, wars still happened, the world still spun as usual. But in hidden laboratories deep under the oceans and mountains, something new was starting to grow, a sense of purpose. The humiliation from that meeting wasn't forgotten. It became a silent promise. Back in the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, the alien delegates discussed Earth's reaction. "They will try," one of them said. "They always do. But their nature will betray them." The speaker replied, "Let them. The young often believe struggle makes them strong. We shall see." They didn't realize that humans were different. Unlike other species, they didn't give up after being dismissed. They carried pain like fire, using it to build, to rise, to prove wrong those who doubted them. Years later, as humanity continued to advance, whispers of Project Horizon began among those who were part of the secret effort. It was more than just science. It was a quiet revolution. They didn't want revenge. They wanted respect. But deep down, everyone knew that someday the Council would notice them again. And when that day came, Earth would not stand as a humble visitor seeking approval. It would stand as an equal. No one could have predicted how far that quiet determination would go, or how much it would change the balance of power in the galaxy. But the seed was planted on that day. The day humanity realized that to be respected among the stars, they first had to believe in themselves. And so, while the Council forgot about the small blue world they mocked, Earth remembered every word. The silence that followed wasn't defeat, it was preparation. After the first contact with the Galactic Council ended, the world tried to move on. The news was never made public, and only a small group of people knew what had really happened. But among those few, something had changed forever. They had seen the universe's judgment, cold, distant, and proud. They had seen how little humanity meant to those beyond Earth. The humiliation didn't break them. It planted a silent seed that began to grow in the shadows. At first, it was only a few meetings held in hidden conference rooms. A handful of scientists and leaders gathered, still shaken by the Council's words. "You are not ready," the Council speaker had said. That sentence echoed again and again in their minds. They couldn't accept it. They wouldn't. So began the start of something no one outside those walls could have imagined. A project that would change Earth's place in the galaxy forever. It had no name in the beginning, only a purpose to prove that humanity could rise, that the world could stand as one voice. Later it was called Project Horizon. The first challenge wasn't technology, it was trust. Nations had spent decades competing, spying, and fighting for resources. Now they were being asked to work together in silence. The leaders of these secret groups knew that if they couldn't trust each other, the project would collapse before it began. Slowly, through quiet diplomacy, they built a bridge of understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A secret base was built deep under the ice of Antarctica, hidden from satellites and public eyes. Another was buried beneath the Pacific Ocean, camouflaged among the seabed communication lines. The people who worked there weren't soldiers or politicians. They were thinkers, builders, dreamers. Each of them had been carefully chosen not for loyalty to any flag, but for loyalty to humanity itself. The work was slow at first. Every idea felt impossible. But the scientists had something more powerful than alien technology. They had determination. They studied quantum energy, artificial intelligence, and propulsion systems that could move without traditional fuel. Every failure was treated not as a setback, but as a lesson. As the years passed, small breakthroughs began to appear. A new kind of engine that could travel across the solar system in weeks instead of years. A satellite network that could stay invisible to external scans. A defense shield made of magnetic waves that could protect cities from cosmic radiation. But the most powerful creation wasn't a weapon. It was unity. People who had once been enemies now shared food, laughter, and stories while working side by side. They stopped seeing themselves as representatives of nations and started to see themselves as part of one species. It was strange, almost emotional. The kind of cooperation humanity had dreamed of but never truly achieved until that moment. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council didn't pay attention. To them, Earth was just another small world stuck in its growing pains. They believed humans would destroy themselves before ever becoming a threat. That arrogance became their greatest mistake. Back on Earth, the few who led Project Horizon watched the stars every night. They knew the Council might one day return, maybe to test them, maybe to control them. The Council had many rules, and any civilization that advanced too fast without permission was seen as dangerous. Humanity knew that sooner or later they would be noticed again. That thought became their motivation. During one of their meetings, a senior scientist stood before a screen showing Earth's view from space. He spoke quietly but firmly. They think we are weak because they saw us divided. They saw nations, not humanity. But when they return, they will see something different. They will see one world. No one clapped, no one cheered, but every person in that room felt the same fire burning inside. The project grew in size and scope. Underground cities were built to support it. Artificial intelligence systems managed logistics, keeping everything hidden. Even though the project was global, only a few thousand people truly knew its purpose. To the rest of the world, it was just another set of research programs working on energy and communication. The strange thing was, even the world outside began to change without realizing it. Clean energy became more common. Global conflicts started to decrease, and countries began to share scientific data more freely. What started as a secret effort slowly began to shape the surface world too. Humanity was beginning to evolve. One quiet night, far beneath the Arctic, the project's main base faced its first crisis. A powerful storm had damaged the energy grid. Communication lines were failing. Inside the control room, people worked frantically to restore the systems. No one panicked. They had learned something that the Council didn't understand. Humans had a way of surviving through chaos. They adapted, and within hours the system was stable again. That moment became symbolic for the team. It reminded them of Earth itself, fragile, unstable, but always finding a way to endure. As months turned into years, a question began to rise among the team. What if the Council never comes back? Some believed they should reveal the project to the world, unite humanity openly. Others thought it was too early. They didn't want power-hungry nations to use the technology for war. The debate was long, emotional, and often divided the group. But in the end, they decided to stay silent until the time was right. One day, a new signal was detected in the Deep Space Monitoring Array. It wasn't from the Council, but it was close. A faint pulse repeating every hour coming from the edge of the solar system. It wasn't a threat, but it reminded everyone that they were not alone. The message was simple but chilling. Observation continues. It was a reminder that the Council still watched them, even from afar. That night, the leaders of Project Horizon gathered again. The same question filled the room. How long before the Council interferes again? They knew they had to be ready, not for war, but for defense. The Council's blockade or punishment could come at any moment, and Earth couldn't afford to be unprepared. From that day onward, the project's focus shifted slightly. Alongside exploration, they began building silent defense systems, drones that could operate in space, satellites that could shield communications, and advanced AIs that could react faster than any human. But everything they built followed one rule: no first strike. The purpose was not destruction, it was protection. They didn't want to fight. They wanted to be respected. The more they worked, the more they realized something profound. The greatest strength of humanity was not its technology, but its spirit. Machines could break, systems could fail, but the human will to endure was something even the Council couldn't understand. Every person who joined Project Horizon carried that spirit. Some worked for science, some for their children's future, some simply for pride in being human. They were ordinary people doing extraordinary things, not for fame or power, but for a quiet dream that one day, when the universe looked at Earth again, it would see more than a fragile blue planet. Years later, a prototype of Earth's first interstellar ship was completed, sleek, silent, built with alloys unknown even a decade earlier. It wasn't designed to travel to another star yet, but it was a message to the universe. Humanity was no longer afraid. As it launched into orbit, the crew inside looked down at the planet below. The oceans glowed under the sunlight, and clouds moved gently over continents. For a brief moment, they felt something powerful, not pride, not fear, but peace. They knew that the journey had just begun. Far away in the chambers of the Galactic Council, a faint transmission from Earth flickered across their monitoring systems. One of the delegates turned toward the speaker and said, "The young species is growing faster than predicted." The speaker replied calmly, "Let them. Growth without guidance often leads to downfall." But deep down, even the council couldn't deny it. Earth was no longer just a small, noisy world. It was changing. And so while the universe looked elsewhere, humanity continued to build quietly, patiently, and together. The people of Earth didn't know it yet, but their hidden preparation was leading to a future that would shock the galaxy itself. The countdown to that moment had already begun. Years passed quietly after Project Horizon took shape. Humanity had changed, even if the rest of the galaxy didn't know it yet. On the surface, Earth looked the same. Busy cities, everyday lives, people working, loving, and struggling as they always had. But under that normal surface, a silent transformation was taking place. Humanity was no longer the same species that had once begged for recognition. They had learned how to work together, how to think beyond borders, how to build without being seen. And for a while, everything felt peaceful, but peace never lasts forever. Far beyond the solar system, the Galactic Council had begun to notice something. Reports from their long-range observation probes showed that Earth's technological growth had become unusual, far too rapid for a young world. The Council's analysts calculated that in less than 2 decades, humanity would reach a level that could rival several mid-tier civilizations. To them, that was unacceptable. At a grand assembly held on a floating structure orbiting a dying star, representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered. Holographic displays filled the chamber, showing data collected from Earth, energy readings, AI networks, orbital structures, and deep space transmissions. The council speaker, a luminous figure with a calm but commanding presence, addressed them all. The species known as human continues to expand its capabilities beyond permitted boundaries, the speaker said. Their recent energy output shows patterns of directed weaponization. Their unified development suggests hidden intent. Intervention is required. Some of the delegates disagreed. They have not attacked anyone, one argued. They are only protecting themselves. But others were firm. They are unpredictable. They multiply too quickly. They refuse to submit to our guidance. If we allow them to rise unchecked, they will disrupt the balance. After hours of debate, a final decision was made. The council would enforce what they called Containment Protocol 9. It wasn't war. It was a blockade, a total restriction on all interstellar movement and communication for Earth. The message was sent out instantly through the cosmic network. On Earth, deep space scanners detected the signal before it even reached them fully. Within days, massive council vessels appeared near the edge of the solar system. They didn't enter orbit, but their presence was clear, like distant thunder before a storm. The people of Earth had no idea. Life went on as usual. Only the small circle behind Project Horizon knew the truth. Inside their underground base, the leaders watched the incoming readings, enormous ships, each the size of a city, silently surrounding the solar system's outer rim. One of the researchers stared at the data and whispered, "They've come back." No one panicked. They had always known this day would come. For years they had prepared not for attack, but for survival. The question wasn't whether they could win. It was whether they could endure without losing what made them human. The council's first message came days later. It wasn't broadcast publicly. It was transmitted directly to Earth's unified communication system. The voice of the Council speaker echoed in every secure channel. Species of Earth. Your expansion violates the agreed principles of development. You have built weapons and machines without approval. You have interfered with cosmic stability. You are to dismantle your high-energy systems immediately and return to your prior level of progress. Failure to comply will result in forced compliance. The message was calm, emotionless, and final. When the transmission ended, silence filled the control room. The people there looked at one another, tired, anxious, but not afraid. One of the engineers finally spoke, his voice steady. If we obey, everything we've built dies. If we resist, they'll destroy us. What do? The leader of the project, an older figure with years of quiet patience, simply said, "We hold our ground. We respond not with anger, but with truth." And so, Earth sent a reply. Council of the Stars. We mean no harm. We do not seek war. We only seek the right to exist freely. We will not dismantle our progress, for progress is life. We are ready to discuss, but not to kneel. The Council's reply came within minutes, short, cold, and final. Defiance confirmed. Containment begins. And just like that, the blockade was activated. Every communication line that connected Earth to the outer systems was jammed. Probes sent beyond the solar system vanished. Supply ships from nearby trade colonies were stopped and searched. Invisible energy fields surrounded the solar borders, cutting off signals. The Council called it a peaceful restriction, but to Earth it felt like a silent prison. Weeks passed. Satellites detected Council ships stationed near Jupiter and Saturn. They didn't fire, but their message was clear. We are watching. Publicly, no one on Earth knew what was happening. The world governments quietly shut down certain programs, pretending it was for technical reasons. But behind the scenes, Project Horizon went into full motion. Every hidden base, every AI system, every defense mechanism began working together. The people of Earth were tired of being underestimated. Meetings took place every night in secret chambers. The leaders argued, debated, and sometimes clashed. But no one suggested surrender. They knew if they gave up now, the Council would never see Earth as equal again. One of the young scientists spoke during one such meeting. They think we are dangerous because we are different, she said. But maybe they are afraid. Maybe they fear what happens when someone they used to control learns to stand on their own. The room went silent because everyone knew she was right. Over the next months, humanity faced its biggest test, staying united under pressure. There were whispers among the Council ships that humans might panic, turn against each other, or collapse under the blockade. But the opposite happened. Instead of dividing, Earth became more focused, more coordinated, more determined. Factories once used for consumer goods began producing components for deep space infrastructure. Energy plants switched to new, more efficient systems that didn't rely on external fuel. Even agriculture was redesigned to function in isolation. It was as if the entire planet had become one living, breathing organism fighting to survive. Every night, the people inside Project Horizon would look up at the sky, seeing faint flashes of light where the Council's ships moved in orbit. They felt the weight of what they were up against, civilizations far older, far stronger, and far more advanced. Yet deep inside, they also felt something the Council could never understand: pride. Pride that came from unity. Pride that came from the simple truth that Earth belonged to no one but its people. As time passed, strange things began to happen. Some of the Council's smaller patrol vessels started losing contact. Their systems would flicker, and their instruments would fail for hours at a time. They blamed it on solar radiation, unaware that humanity's defense network had quietly evolved into something far more powerful than they suspected. Project Horizon had created a system capable of disrupting the Council's technology without harming anyone. It was Earth's way of saying, "We see you too." The Council began to grow uneasy. For the first time, the powerful Federation realized that this small, young world was not as helpless as they believed. Back on Earth, the people continued to prepare. There were no speeches, no parades, no shouting of victory. Only silence, the kind that comes from focus and faith. Inside the main control chamber, the leader of Project Horizon stood before a massive screen showing the stars beyond the solar system. He spoke softly, almost to himself. They call this a containment, but they don't understand. They're teaching us how to stand alone, and once we do, no one will ever contain us again. Outside, in the dark space between worlds, the Council's ships hovered, silent, watching, waiting. They had no idea that their own actions were shaping the very thing they feared most, the rise of a united humanity. And somewhere deep in the heart of Earth's hidden command center, a countdown had quietly begun, not to attack, not to destroy, but to awaken something that would soon change the balance of the universe. The world that had once been mocked for being small and fragile was now preparing to make the galaxy listen. The Council believed they were in control, but soon they would realize that silence from Earth was not surrender. It was the sound of something powerful growing in the shadows. And when that silence finally broke, the stars themselves would tremble. The solar system had been silent for weeks. The Galactic Council's blockade surrounded Earth like a cold ring of invisible chains. From the outer planets to the edge of the Kuiper Belt, their ships floated quietly, scanning every transmission, blocking every signal that tried to escape. To the Council, it was just a small measure of control, a way to remind humanity of its place. But to Earth, it felt like the entire sky had been taken away. Still, there was no panic. Not this time. Humanity had changed. Inside the hidden chambers of Project Horizon, deep under layers of reinforced rock and technology, the atmosphere was calm. Not of fear, but of focus. The people there knew something the Council did not. Earth was no longer defenseless. For years, they had built systems not meant for war, but for survival. Artificial intelligence that could think faster than any human. Energy grids that could adapt and repair themselves. Quantum drones that could operate silently across the solar system. All of it connected through something called the Global Conscious Network, a vast web that linked machines, satellites and human minds in real time. And now, that network was awake. The Council had crossed a line when they tried to isolate Earth. To them, it was a strategic move. To humanity, it was an insult, one that could not go unanswered. The leaders of Project Horizon gathered for a final meeting in the main chamber. The air was heavy with anticipation. On the screens around them, holographic maps displayed the Council's ship positions, their movements, their energy patterns. They were strong, yes, and far stronger than anything humanity had ever faced. But they had a weakness. They didn't understand humans. One of the scientists looked around the room and said quietly, "They think we will fight them with guns and ships. They think like conquerors, but we're not conquerors. We're survivors." The leader nodded slowly. "Then it's time we remind them who we are." That night the unthinkable happened. Not an attack, but a response so powerful it would be remembered across the galaxy. At exactly 03 Azar's universal time, every satellite in Earth's orbit, every drone in the outer atmosphere, and every hidden outpost across the solar system came online at once. The network synchronized in a single pulse, a silent wave that rippled through the void. Within seconds, electromagnetic fields expanded from Earth's poles, forming invisible arcs that extended deep into space. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It didn't destroy. It disrupted. The Council ships began to experience strange malfunctions. Their lights flickered. Navigation systems froze. Their communication links failed. Power cores went offline one after another. The blockade, once an unbreakable ring of control, then fell into silence. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single life was lost. From the Council's perspective, it was chaos. Commanders sent distress signals, but none reached their fleet. In their grand chamber, the delegates watched in confusion as data feeds vanished one by one. No one understood what had happened. On Earth, the people inside Project Horizon watched calmly. They didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They just watched as the system they had spent years building did exactly what it was designed to do: neutralize aggression without causing destruction. The entire event lasted less than an hour. By dawn, the Council's ships were completely immobilized. They floated powerless, trapped in silence. Then, for the first time in history, Earth sent a message not of surrender but of resolve. It wasn't long or poetic. It was short, clear, and human. We do not seek war. We seek respect. The message was transmitted across every known frequency, every wavelength, every communication path the Council used. They couldn't ignore it. It echoed in every system they had. Back in the Council chamber, the speaker stood motionless. Its glowing form dimmed slightly as it processed the message. Around it, dozens of delegates whispered in disbelief. "How did they do it?" one asked. "They are primitive," another muttered. "They cannot possibly have such control." But the speaker knew better. "They adapted," it said softly. "They learned from us and they used what we ignored. Unity." Meanwhile, on Earth, the people who had worked day and night inside the secret bases finally took a breath. Many had tears in their eyes, not because they had defeated someone, but because they had proven something. They had shown that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or weapons. It was its spirit, its ability to rise from humiliation, to turn pain into progress, and to fight without hate. The Council's ships remained motionless for days. They tried to reboot their systems, but Earth's electromagnetic field continued to neutralize their energy. Still, humanity didn't take advantage. They didn't threaten or attack. Instead, they helped. Through encrypted signals, Earth sent data packets to the disabled ships, instructions on how to safely restart their systems without damage. It was a gesture that shocked even the Council's most skeptical members. Humanity could have taken revenge. Instead, they chose mercy. When the ships finally regained power, they found themselves facing an Earth that was glowing with energy. A planet united, alive, and ready. They could sense it even from space, a feeling of quiet strength radiating from the world below. The Council had expected fear. They found dignity. Back in the hidden command center, the leader of Project Horizon watched as the Council's ships slowly retreated from the outer solar system. The data on the screen showed them moving one by one, leaving the blockade position. He didn't smile, but there was a calm in his eyes. "They've learned," he said softly, "at least for now." The scientists and engineers around him didn't say much. They just sat there, knowing they had changed the course of history. What started as humiliation had become a lesson for the entire galaxy. That night, the sky looked different. The stars seemed brighter, closer somehow. For the first time in generations, humanity didn't look up in fear. They looked up with pride. But even in that moment of peace, they knew it wasn't over. The Council would not forget what had happened. They would return, not with anger perhaps, but with questions. And when they did, Earth would need to be ready not just to defend itself, but to lead. Still, for now, silence filled the night sky, the kind of silence that came after something impossible had been achieved. On a quiet hill outside a small observatory, a few young astronomers stared through their telescopes, unaware of the full story. They noticed the strange movements of distant lights and the sudden disappearance of several bright objects in the outer system. They didn't know it yet, but they were witnessing the moment when humanity's voice first echoed across the galaxy. From that day forward, no one, not even the oldest civilization in the Council, could look at Earth the same way again. The Speaker of the Council addressed its members in a private session days later. Its tone was heavy, thoughtful, almost respectful. "The species we called wild," it said, "has shown restraint greater than any of us. They have learned peace through struggle. They are not to be underestimated again." Some disagreed, arguing that humanity's power was dangerous. Others, however, saw something different: potential. The debate lasted long into the cosmic night, and while they argued, Earth continued its quiet progress as if nothing extraordinary had happened. People still worked, laughed, and dreamed. Children still went to school. The world moved forward, unaware that it had just rewritten its destiny. In the hidden rooms of Project Horizon, the leaders began a new phase, not of preparation for defense, but of exploration. They knew now that the galaxy was listening, and if humanity was to be known, it had to be known for something more than power. It had to be known for its heart. So they began planning the next step: the creation of the first interstellar alliance led by Earth, built on cooperation, not fear. But deep down, they all knew the truth. The balance of the galaxy had shifted forever. The Council might never admit it out loud, but they had been shaken to their core, because in that single silent act of resistance, humanity had done something no civilization had ever dared to do. They had made the rulers of the galaxy stop and listen. And somewhere, in the endless sea of stars, that message continued to travel. We do not seek war. We seek respect. It was more than a statement. It was a new beginning. The night sky, once a symbol of loneliness, had become a mirror reflecting humanity's courage. And though no one knew what challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never forget the day Earth stood tall and spoke through silence. The unthinkable had happened, not through destruction, but through understanding. And that was how humanity's true strength was finally seen by the universe. The galaxy had gone quiet. No ships moved. No signals crossed the stars. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council had nothing to say. Their fleets were still drifting in the edges of the solar system, recovering from the mysterious disruption that had shut down every system they had. They had faced many rebellions before, whole worlds that had tried to fight back. But this was different. Earth hadn't fought with weapons. It had simply responded, and that response had stunned everyone. Inside the council hall, the air was tense. The enormous chamber, usually filled with argument and light, now stood in near darkness. Delegates from hundreds of worlds sat silently, their faces pale with disbelief. Some were angry, others were afraid, but most were simply lost. No one had expected such restraint from humanity. No one had expected mercy. On Earth, things were calmer than anyone could have imagined. The world had not celebrated or thrown parades. There were no grand speeches or military honors. Instead, there was reflection. People sat quietly in front of their screens, watching news reports from across the planet. They didn't see victory. They saw realization. Humanity had changed. For years, Earth had been seen as fragile, divided, and unpredictable. Now it stood united in purpose. Every nation, every community, every person seemed to carry a quiet understanding. They were no longer small. In the hidden chamber of Project Horizon, the leaders met again. The lights were dim, and the air was filled with the soft hum of machines still monitoring the skies. The event they had triggered had gone far beyond their expectations. It had not only disabled the Council's fleet, but also sent a shockwave of awareness through every advanced civilization in the galaxy. One of the engineers looked up from his console. "They're still out there," he said softly. "Watching, listening, trying to understand what we did." The leader nodded slowly. "Let them watch," he replied. "Let them see that we didn't destroy anything. We only showed them what we are capable of." There was a long pause before he continued. "The silence that follows will say more than any message we could send." And he was right. Over the next few weeks, the galaxy's communication channels remained strangely empty. No orders came from the Council. No broadcasts, no warnings, no demands. Their usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by an uncertain quiet. Many of the Council's member worlds began to question their leaders. "If Earth can do this," they whispered, "what else can they do?" In some places, the word Earth was spoken with respect. In others, with fear. But no one ignored it anymore. Meanwhile, on the blue planet below, life slowly returned to normal. Children went back to school. Farmers tended to their crops. Scientists resumed their research. But beneath the calm surface, there was a quiet pride that had never existed before. People began to look at the night sky differently. The stars no longer seemed distant. They seemed reachable. The space agencies across the world reopened old programs not for war but for exploration. Young minds gathered to study the mysteries of quantum energy, propulsion, and cosmic communication. It was as if the entire planet had woken up with a new dream. A dream not of domination but of discovery. In the evenings, the leader of Project Horizon often stood on the rooftop of the facility, looking at the stars. The wind would carry the faint hum of the power generators below, but above that there was only silence. One night, an assistant joined him. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "They will, but not for war. They'll come to talk. They just need time to understand what happened." She looked at him curiously. "And what will we say when they do?" He turned his eyes toward the glowing line of the horizon. "We'll say the same thing we said before, that we don't want war. We just want to be treated as equals." Far beyond Earth, on a distant world that served as the Council's capital, the Speaker of the Council sat in silence. Before it, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. The blue and white colors reflected off the chamber walls, calm and beautiful. One of the senior advisors spoke, his voice trembling slightly. "They crippled our fleet without firing a single weapon. If they wanted, they could have ended us." The speaker's eyes glowed dimly. "But they didn't," it said softly. "And that's what we must learn from." It leaned back, lost in thought. "Perhaps we have misunderstood them all along. We saw their chaos and called it weakness. We saw their emotion and called it instability. But what if those were their strengths?" Across the room, the delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Some refused to believe it. To them, humanity was still a primitive species that had simply stumbled upon some forbidden power. Others, however, were beginning to see the truth. The speaker continued, "They did not destroy. They chose restraint. That is not weakness. That is wisdom." Meanwhile, in the far reaches of space, one of the disabled council ships still floated near Jupiter's orbit. Its crew had spent days trying to understand what had happened. When they finally restored partial power, they received a strange transmission, a single signal repeating endlessly in human language. It wasn't a threat or a warning. It was music, a simple melody, soft and haunting, played through the ship's speakers. It had no words, just emotion, the kind that reached beyond language. Some of the crew listened in silence, realizing it was Earth's way of saying, "We are still here. We are still human." Back on Earth, scientists tracked the ship's response. When they noticed that the transmission had been received, they didn't send another signal. They just waited, because sometimes silence carried more power than sound. Days turned into weeks. The Council finally sent a message, not to threaten but to request dialogue. It was brief, formal, and cautious. "To the people of Earth we request communication. We seek understanding." When the message arrived, the entire command center fell silent. The leader read it twice before placing the tablet down. Everyone looked at him, waiting for his decision. He finally said, "We'll answer them." But not with fear, not with pride. With honesty. The reply was sent from the same system that had once disabled the Council's fleet, but this time the signal carried warmth instead of power. "We will speak. We seek understanding too." The galaxy waited. The meeting that followed would not be broadcasted. It wouldn't happen in the Council's grand chambers or on Earth's surface. It would take place in the neutral zone, aboard a small, silver station orbiting Saturn's largest moon. For the first time, humans and the Council's delegates would meet face to face. As the day approached, the world held its breath. Everyone knew it wasn't just about peace or technology anymore. It was about recognition. When the meeting finally began, no one spoke for several minutes. They just looked at each other, beings from different worlds separated by light years, now sharing the same small space. The leader of Project Horizon finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, steady, and human. "We never wanted to be your enemies," he said. "We only wanted to be respected. When you blockaded our world, you left us no choice but to show you what we could do. But even then, we never wanted destruction." The Speaker of the Council replied slowly, its tone softer than before. "And now that you have our attention, what do you want?" The leader smiled faintly. "A future where no world feels the need to fight for dignity." The words hung in the air. For a long time, no one spoke. The silence stretched, deep, thoughtful, almost sacred. Then the speaker stood and extended its hand, a gesture no one expected. "Then let this be the first step." And just like that, the tension that had once filled the galaxy began to fade. Back on Earth, as news of the meeting spread, the world didn't erupt in celebration. Instead, people looked at the sky again, this time with hope. Children pointed to the stars, dreaming of the day humans would walk among them not as conquerors, but as equals. The silence that had once followed Earth's retaliation now meant something entirely different. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of respect. Across the galaxy, the name Earth carried new meaning. Not a world of chaos, not a planet of defiance, but a symbol of restraint, courage, and unity. And somewhere deep in space, The melody that humanity had sent continued to echo through the void, a reminder that sometimes the loudest message of all comes not through power, but through peace. It was the moment when the galaxy finally listened, the moment when silence became humanity's greatest voice, and in that silence the future of two worlds began to change forever. The silence that had once filled the galaxy slowly began to fade. After weeks of waiting, cautious messages started moving again between worlds. But this time the tone was different, softer, calmer, more thoughtful. It was as if everyone had taken a deep breath and realized how close they had come to losing something far greater than power. Understanding. Earth's quiet act of restraint had changed everything. The Galactic Council, once proud and untouchable, now treated every word from humanity with a kind of careful respect. No more threats, no more warnings, only questions, honest, curious questions. How did you do it? They asked. Why didn't you destroy us when you had the chance? And Earth's answer was always the same. Because we remember what it means to feel powerless. That answer reached more ears than anyone expected. Across the galaxy, countless civilizations began to look toward the small blue planet that had once been dismissed as primitive. For the first time they saw not weakness but wisdom. On Earth, life began to move into a new rhythm. The fear that once surrounded the idea of the Galactic Council had faded into memory. The skies above no longer carried a sense of danger, only possibility. The old secret facilities like Project Horizon were no longer hidden. Their doors were opened to scientists, students, and explorers from all nations. What had been a place of defense now became a place of learning. Inside the main hall, huge screens displayed images of distant stars, planets, and galaxies, not as threats, but as destinations. Humanity's focus had shifted from survival to exploration. The leader of Project Horizon stood before a group of young recruits one morning, their faces filled with curiosity and excitement. He looked at them and said, "The universe has finally seen who we are. Now it's time we see who they are." The new generation of humans didn't want revenge or dominance. They wanted connection. They wanted to understand the civilizations that had once feared or mocked them, and for the first time, they had the chance to do exactly that. In the months that followed, the first Interstellar Council was formed, not as a replacement for the old one, but as a bridge. Representatives from dozens of worlds, including Earth, agreed to meet in peace and discuss how to build a shared future. The first meeting took place aboard a neutral station orbiting Saturn, the same place where humanity had first met the Council after the silent Retaliation. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. There was no tension, no suspicion, only a cautious sense of hope. The speaker of the Galactic Council addressed the assembly. Its voice was calm, almost humble. Once we tried to control. We believed order came from fear. But now, we have learned that peace can come only from understanding. Earth has shown us that. The words echoed through the chamber. For a moment, everyone was silent. Then slowly the humans began to applaud. It was a small sound at first, gentle and respectful. But it grew louder, spreading across the hall until even the alien delegates joined in. It wasn't celebration. It was acknowledgement. A shared recognition that something had changed. From that day onward, the stars didn't just belong to the Council. They belonged to everyone. Back on Earth, cities began to glow with new light. Massive skyports were built in orbit, designed not for warships but for exploration vessels. Nations worked together like never before. Borders that once divided them began to fade, replaced by a sense of collective pride. People started referring to this new time as the Dawn Era, the age when humanity stopped looking down and started looking outward. But even as the world advanced, the memory of what had happened remained close. The people never forgot the moment they had stood against the galaxy not with weapons but with wisdom, and they knew they must never lose that balance again. One evening, the leader of Project Horizon stood by the observation deck, watching Earth from orbit. The planet looked peaceful, blue oceans shimmering beneath golden sunlight, white clouds drifting slowly across its surface. He remembered the days of fear, when the Council's ships had hovered in the dark and humanity had felt small. And now, looking at the same sky, he smiled faintly. "We were never small," he whispered. "We just hadn't realized how strong we already were." Down on the surface, families gathered around holographic screens as a broadcast began. It was the first universal message, a joint declaration between Earth and the Galactic Council, sent to every corner of the known galaxy. The message began with Earth's leader speaking calmly. To every world that can hear this message, we send peace. Not because we are stronger, but because we have learned. The universe is vast, but so is our capacity for kindness. The Speaker of the Council followed, its voice soft but firm. Let this be the age of listening, not conquering. For we have all seen what happens when pride blinds wisdom. Across the stars, billions watched in silence. The message didn't just travel through frequencies and satellites. It traveled through hearts. On distant planets, children pointed at the image of Earth and smiled. Some said it looked like a jewel floating in the dark. Others said it looked like hope. Weeks later, the first joint exploration fleet, a collaboration between Earth and the Council, set sail into deep space. The ships were unlike anything seen before, crafted from human design and alien engineering. Their mission was simple: to explore, to learn, and to remind every civilization that peace was possible. As the fleet departed, millions on Earth looked up, watching the glowing trails of light vanish into the night sky. There were no tears, no fear, only pride. And somewhere in that fleet, the same melody that humanity had once sent into the void, that gentle, wordless song, played again through the communication channels. But this time it wasn't a signal of silence. It was a song of unity. Back on Earth, old scientists who had once worked in secret now taught in open universities. They spoke of the importance of knowledge guided by empathy. Power means nothing, one of them told his students, if it's not balanced with compassion. The young ones listened closely, their eyes full of wonder. To them, the events that had once nearly led to disaster were stories, reminders that courage wasn't about fighting, but about standing firm in truth. And so, the world changed, quietly, beautifully. Years later, when the history of this age was written, it didn't begin with the words "Earth fought the Council." It began with, "Earth reminded the galaxy what it means to be human." The universe remembered that lesson. Even the oldest civilizations, those who had seen empires rise and fall, spoke of the time when a small planet on the edge of a spiral galaxy stood up not with force but with grace. They called it the moment of awakening. And through the centuries that followed, whenever a new conflict threatened to break the fragile peace, someone would always remind the others, "Remember Earth. Remember how silence spoke louder than war." The story became legend, told in schools, sung in songs, recorded in the stars. And every time humanity looked up, they didn't just see a sky full of stars. They saw a reminder of what they had achieved together. No longer were they alone. No longer were they underestimated. They were a voice of reason in a galaxy that had once forgotten how to listen. As the sun rose over the horizon one quiet morning, painting the clouds with gold and silver, the leader of Project Horizon looked out from his window one last time. The world below was peaceful. The skies above were open. He smiled and whispered to himself, "This is what we were meant to become." The camera of history would have captured that moment. One man standing at the edge of a new world, watching humanity step into the stars with open hearts. And somewhere in the distance, among the countless galaxies, the faint echo of Earth's old message still traveled through time and space. "We do not seek war. We seek respect." Those words had changed everything. The galaxy had learned. Earth had grown. And a new era had begun. An era built not on fear or control, but on understanding, courage, and unity. The stars that once seemed unreachable now welcomed humanity like old friends. The silence that once brought fear now brought peace. And the story of Earth, the world that taught the galaxy how to listen, became the first chapter in a brand new beginning. The dawn of a new era had truly begun.